The great hall of Nexus Prime had never seen such fear. Admiral Dexani stood before the assembled leaders of 47 different species, and every single one of them looked terrified. The holographic displays around the room showed the same. Horrible truth over and over again. Red zones everywhere. Lost worlds. Dead civilizations. The Vorok Empire was winning. Sector 7 has fallen, Admiral Lexani announced, her crystalline body flickering with nervous energy. The Kelthari defense fleet lasted only 6 hours against their machines. A low murmur ran through the crowd. Kelthari were known throughout the galaxy as fierce warriors. Their forearms could wield weapons with deadly precision. Their battle tactics had kept peace in the Outer Rim for 300 years. If they could fall in 6 hours, what hope did anyone else have? "How many ships did we lose?" asked General Mortek, his insect-like features clicking with worry. "All of them," Vexoni replied. The Vorok drones learned their attack patterns within the first hour. By the end, our ships were shooting at targets that weren't there, while the real drones tore them apart. The Vorok were unlike any enemy the galaxy had ever faced. They were machines, but not simple robots. Each drone could think, learn, and adapt. Worse still, they shared information instantly across their entire network. Fight one Vorok drone, and within minutes, every other drone in the Empire would know exactly how to beat the same tactics. "What about the Maladi?" someone called out. "Can their mind powers stop the machines?" Admiral Vexani's light dimmed further. The Maladi tried to use their psychic abilities 3 days ago. The Vorok adapted. They now broadcast a mental static that makes it impossible for the Maladi to focus their powers. The silence that followed was deafening. The Maladi were the most advanced psychic species in the galaxy. Their ability to read minds and predict enemy movements had made them nearly invincible in battle. If even they had fallen, what could anyone do? "We need a new strategy," declared Ambassador Quilks, his tentacles writhing with anxiety. "Something the Vorok have never seen before." "Like what?" General Mortek shot back. "We've tried everything. Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, biological warfare, quantum disruption fields. The machines adapt to all of it. We need help from outside," Vexani said quietly. "From species the Vorok have never encountered." "There are no more species," Quilks replied. "We've contacted every civilization in known space. The ones that aren't dead are hiding behind our defense lines." Junior Research Coordinator Veltar had been quiet throughout the meeting, but now she stepped forward. Her small frame shook as she activated her datapad. "Actually, there might be one option." The entire assembly turned to look at her. Veltar had never spoken in a full council session before. Her job was to catalog distant star systems and file boring reports about planetary compositions. 3 months ago, our deep space monitoring stations detected something unusual. She began, her voice growing stronger. "Radio signals from a star system in the far spiral arm, sector designation Cell 3. Radio signals?" General Mortek scoffed. "That's ancient technology." "Ancient. Any species still using radio waves would be centuries behind us. That's what we thought too," Veltar continued. "But when we analyzed the signals more carefully, we found something strange. The transmission showed signs of advanced mathematical understanding, complex engineering principles. And most importantly, they were coming from a Class 12 death world." Room fell silent. Class 12 death worlds were the most dangerous planets in the galaxy. High gravity, toxic atmosphere, extreme weather, and predatory life forms that could kill most galactic species in minutes. The scientific community had long agreed that intelligent life could never evolve on such a world. "You're saying there's a species that evolved on a Class 12? Ambassador Quilks asked, his tentacles going completely still. "The planetary data is incredible," Veltar replied, pulling up holographic displays. "Gravity is twice our standard. The atmosphere contains enough oxygen to be toxic to most of us. The weather patterns include storms that would level our cities. And the native life forms?" She paused, checking her data. "The native life forms seem to exist in a constant state of warfare with each other." "What kind of warfare?" Admiral Vexani asked. "Predator and prey relationships that make no sense? Creatures that hunt in packs?" others that use tools, some that appear to kill for reasons other than food. The entire ecosystem seems designed to create the most aggressive, adaptable survivors possible. The council members looked at each other with growing unease. If such a world existed, and if intelligent life had somehow evolved there, what kind of beings would they be? The radio signals, General Mortek said slowly. What did they contain? Veltar's display changed to show wave patterns and frequency. Analyzes music mostly. Stories, something they call entertainment. But the content is... disturbing. Disturbing how? Their entertainment focuses on conflict. Survival against impossible odds. Combat between individuals for sport. They seem to consider violence a normal part of daily life. Ambassador Quilks's tentacles began writhing again. Are you suggesting we contact a species of violent primitives? They're not primitive, Veltar said firmly. Engineering signatures we've detected suggest they have space travel. Multiple artificial satellites. Energy production on a massive scale. They've not only survived their death world, they've thrived on it. Admiral Dexani studied the data carefully. Her crystalline mind worked through the implications. In a species that evolved on a Class 12 world would have survival instincts we can't imagine. They would be naturally aggressive, adaptable, and used to fighting for their lives. Exactly the opposite of what we need, General Mortek protested. We need allies, not more violence. Do we? Vexoni asked. The Vorthok are winning because they adapt faster than we can change our tactics. But what if we had allies whose tactics were so chaotic that adaptation was impossible? The room began to buzz with nervous conversation. The idea was both terrifying and intriguing. Contact a species from a death world and ask them to help fight the most dangerous enemy the galaxy had ever faced. It's insane, someone called out. It's desperate, Admiral Dexani replied. Desperate times call for desperate measures. Ambassador Quilks looked around the room at the faces of his fellow council members. Fear, desperation, and a tiny spark of hope. What do we know about their military capabilities? Unknown, Veltar admitted. But if they've survived on a Class 12 world, they must have some way of dealing with constant threats. The question is, Admiral Dexani said slowly, do we dare find out what kind of beings could turn a death world into a home? The vote was unanimous. They would make contact with the species from Sol 3. They would ask these unknown beings to join their war against the Vorthok. The council told themselves they were seeking allies, but deep down, they all wondered if they were about to unleash something worse than the machines they were fighting. Ambassador Quilks was chosen to lead the contact mission as he prepared. To depart for the unknown system, he couldn't shake the feeling that the galaxy was about to change forever. The Vorthok had taught them that there were worse things than death in the universe. He was about to discover that there were worse things than the Vorthok, too. The ship Harmony's Edge departed Nexus Prime 3 days later, carrying the hopes and fears of an entire galaxy. None of them knew that they were about to meet a species that considered their impossible world just another day at the office. The human ship Liberty Bell hung in space like a metal predator. Ambassador Quilks stared at it through the viewports of his diplomatic vessel and felt his tentacles curl with unease. The ship was not at all what he had expected from a species that used primitive radio technology. The hull was dark gray, covered in what looked like armor plating. Strange symbols were painted on the sides in bright white. The design was angular and aggressive, nothing like the smooth, elegant curves of council ships. It looked like it was built for war. Ambassador, his aide whispered, "Are you sure about this?" Quilks was not sure about anything anymore. The humans had responded to their first contact message within hours, which was impressive. They had agreed to meet in neutral space, which was diplomatic. Something about their response had bothered him. It seemed excited rather than awed by the prospect of meeting aliens. "Incoming transmission," announced the ship's communication officer. The main screen flickered to life, showing the interior of the human ship. Quilks found himself looking at a being that made his skin crawl. The human was tall, much taller than any council species, with pale skin and hair that had gone gray around the edges. His eyes were small and dark, set deep in his skull, and when he smiled, Quilks could see sharp white teeth. "Welcome to Soul Space," the human said, in a voice that was surprisingly deep. "I'm Captain Jack Morrison of the Earth Defense Force." "Permission to come aboard? Earth Defense Force?" Quilks whispered to his aide. Even their name for their military sounded aggressive. "Of course," Quilks replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "We look forward to meeting you." 20 minutes later, Captain Morrison and his team stepped through the airlock of the diplomatic vessel. Quilks immediately noticed several things that made him uncomfortable. The humans were all tall, much taller than any council species. They moved with a fluid grace that suggested they were used to fighting. And most disturbing of all, they seemed completely relaxed about meeting aliens for the first time. "Ambassador Quilks," Captain Morrison said, extending his hand. "A pleasure to meet you." Quilks had studied human customs and knew this was called a handshake. He reached out with one tentacle to grasp the human's hand. The grip was firm, almost crushing.
Oh.
The human's skin was warm, and Quilks could feel the strength in those fingers. This was a being that could break things with his bare hands. "The pleasure is ours," Quilks managed to say. The human team included a female with short blonde hair, who introduced herself as Dr. Lisa Carter, and a male with dark skin, and alert eyes named Commander Ryan Torres. All of them had the same predatory grace, the same casual confidence. They looked around the council ship with interest rather than wonder. "This is fascinating," Dr. Carter said, examining the walls with intense curiosity. "Your construction techniques are completely different from ours. How do you generate artificial gravity without rotation?" The question caught Quilks off guard. Most first contact scenarios involved explaining basic concepts like space travel or energy production. These humans were asking about advanced engineering principles. "We use gravitic field generators," he replied. "Standard council technology." "Gravitic fields," Dr. Carter repeated, making notes on a small device. "We've theorized about those, but never built one. The power requirements must be enormous." "What kind of power systems do you use?" asked Commander Torres. "Fusion reactors mostly," Quilks said. "Some antimatter for our largest ships." "Antimatter," Captain Morrison nodded. "We're just starting to experiment with that. Most of our ships still use fusion." The casual way they discussed antimatter made Quilks nervous. Antimatter was one of the most dangerous substances in the universe. The fact that these Deathworlders were experimenting with it was deeply concerning. "Perhaps we should discuss why we contacted you," Quilks said, trying to regain control of the conversation. "The war," Captain Morrison said immediately. "Your message mentioned a mechanical enemy that's conquered most of your space." "The Vorok Empire," Quilks confirmed. "They are unlike any enemy we have faced. Their drones can adapt to any tactics. Within minutes, they'll learn from every battle and share that knowledge instantly." "Adaptive AI," Dr. Carter said thoughtfully. "That's an interesting problem. How do they process new information?" "We don't know," Quilks admitted. "They seem to use some form of quantum processing that allows them to modify their behavior in real time." "And you've tried conventional warfare?" Commander Torres asked. "Every form of combat we know," Quilks replied. "Energy weapons, kinetic projectiles, electronic warfare, biological attacks. Nothing works for long." The humans exchanged glances. There was something in their expressions that made Quilks even more uncomfortable. They did not look worried or afraid. They looked interested. "Could we see some battle footage?" Captain Morrison asked. Quilks activated his portable display. Uniden showed them recordings from the latest battles. The Vorok drones were terrifying to watch, sleek mechanical killers that moved with inhuman precision. The footage showed them adapting to council tactics in real time, learning and countering every strategy. "Impressive," Dr. Carter said, studying the tactical displays. "Their learning algorithms are quite sophisticated." "You find them impressive?" Quilks asked, shocked. "From a technical standpoint, yes," she replied. "But they have obvious weaknesses." "Weaknesses?" Quilks leaned forward. "Our best military minds have found no weaknesses. Their adaptation is based on pattern recognition," Dr. Carter explained. "They analyze tactical patterns and develop countermeasures." "But what happens if you don't use patterns?" "I don't understand," Quilks said. "Chaos," Commander Torres said with a grin that showed his teeth. "Pure random chaos." No patterns to analyze. No tactics to counter. That's not a military strategy, Quilks protested. That's just random violence. Sometimes that's exactly what you need, Captain Morrison said quietly. The conversation continued for 2 hours. But Quilks found himself growing more disturbed by the minute. The humans did not react to the Vorthok threat with fear or desperation. They reacted with curiosity and excitement. They asked detailed questions about weapons capabilities, ship specifications, and tactical doctrines. When Commander Torres mentioned that humans considered boxing and martial arts recreational activities, Quilks nearly ended the meeting. These beings fought each other for entertainment. What kind of species did that? We should show them some of our entertainment, Dr. Carter suggested. Cultural exchange and all that. The humans shared what they called movies and music. Quilks watched in horror as the humans showed him stories about war, survival, and conflict. Their music was loud and aggressive. Their stories were filled with violence and death. This is your entertainment? He asked weakly. Some of it, Captain Morrison said. We like stories about overcoming challenges, by fighting and killing. Sometimes, the human replied with a shrug. Life's tough. You do what you have to do. When the meeting finally ended, Quilks was exhausted and terrified. The humans had been polite, even friendly, but there was something fundamentally wrong about them. They were too calm, too confident, too interested in warfare. We'll need to discuss this with our leadership, Captain Morrison said as they prepared to leave. No, but I think we can help you with your Vorthok problem. Help us how? Quilks asked. Showing them what real predators look like, Dr. Carter said with a smile that made Quilks' blood run cold. As the humans returned to their ship, Quilks collapsed into his chair. His aide approached cautiously. Ambassador, how did it go? I think, Quilks said slowly, we may have made a terrible mistake, sir. We asked for help against the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy, Quilks replied, watching the human ship disappear into the darkness. And they said yes. The problem was not that the humans had refused to help. The problem was that they seemed eager to do it. These were not desperate survivors from a death world. These were apex predators who had turned their impossible planet into a thriving civilization, and now they were coming to war. The human fleet arrived at the Kepler defense line like a pack of metal wolves. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of her flagship Defiance, watching the alien ships scatter to make room for the Earth forces. The Council commanders had been expecting maybe a dozen primitive vessels. Instead, they got 37 warships that looked like they were built in the depths of hell. Admiral called Lieutenant Commander Steve Barnes from his tactical station. The alien fleet commander is requesting permission to come aboard. Tell him to come over, Sullivan replied, never taking her eyes off the sensor displays. Kay and Steve, make sure Major Hayes has her Marines ready. I want these aliens to understand what they're dealing with. The alien commander who stepped onto the Defiance 20 minutes later was a tall, blue-skinned being with forearms and cybernetic implants covering half his face. He introduced himself as Fleet Admiral Zexstar of the Kelthari Defense Force. Admiral Sullivan, he said in heavily. Accented English, we are honored by your presence. Your ships are most impressive. Thank you, Sullivan, replied with a cold smile. We brought our best. Admiral Zexstar looked around the bridge with obvious discomfort. The human ship was darker than Council vessels, with red emergency lighting. That cast strange shadows. The crew moved with military precision, but there was something predatory in their movements that made his skin crawl. Your weapons signatures are unlike anything we have seen, he said carefully. What kind of energy systems do you use? Different kinds, Lieutenant Commander Barnes answered from his station. Depends on what we're shooting at. I see, Zexstar said, though he clearly did not see it all. And your defensive systems? We prefer not to get hit, Major Patricia, Hayes said from behind him. The Marine commander had approached silently, moving like a hunting cat. But if we do get hit, we hit back harder. Admiral Zexstar turned to look at the human female. She was shorter than Admiral Sullivan, with dark hair pulled back in a tight bun and scars on her face that spoke of combat experience. Her eyes were the coldest thing he had ever seen. Your military philosophy is interesting, he said nervously. Simple, Hayes replied. Find the enemy, kill the enemy, go home. What about casualties? Zexstar asked. Acceptable loss ratios? You don't plan to lose? Admiral Sullivan said firmly. We plan to win. The conversation was interrupted by proximity alarms. The tactical display showed enemy contacts approaching from the outer system. 37 Vorok drone ships, moving in perfect formation. Red alert, Admiral Sullivan announced calmly. All hands to battle stations. The human crew moved with practiced efficiency. There was no panic, no fear, just cold professionalism. Admiral Zexstar watched in fascination as the humans prepared for battle. Admiral, he said urgently, you should coordinate with our fleet. We have established battle protocols that minimize casualties. Appreciate the offer, Sullivan replied, but we'll handle this our way. Our way has kept us alive for 3 years, Zexstar protested. Our way has kept us alive for 3,000 years, Lieutenant Commander Barnes said without looking up from his station. Trust us. The Vorok drones approached in their standard attack formation, a pattern that had proven effective against every Council fleet they had encountered. They expected the humans to respond with conventional tactics, energy weapons fired from long range, defensive formations designed to minimize losses. Instead, the human fleet did something that made no sense at all. They accelerated directly toward the enemy. What are they doing? Admiral Zexstar asked in horror. Admiral Sullivan said calmly. All ships, weapons free. The human ships opened fire at point-blank range with weapons that defied classification. Some fired traditional energy beams, others launched projectiles that moved faster than most Council ships could track. A few ships seemed to be firing what looked like controlled explosions. This is insane, Admiral Zexstar whispered. This is Tuesday, Major Hayes replied. The Vorok drones tried to adapt to the human tactics. There were no tactics to adapt. 2. The humans were fighting like berserkers, using their own ships as weapons while somehow maintaining precise coordination. They flew through formations that should have torn them apart, firing at targets that should have been impossible to hit. Ship 7 is taking heavy damage, Barnes reported. Tell Captain Rodriguez to ram the nearest drone, Admiral Sullivan ordered. Ram it? Admiral Zexstar asked in shock. Standard procedure, Sullivan replied. If you're going to die anyway, take someone with you. The human ship 7 accelerated toward the largest Vorok drone. At the last second, the crew ejected in escape pods while their ship crashed into the enemy vessel. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire and metal. Rescue shuttles are already moving to pick up the survivors, Barnes reported. Survivors? Zexstar asked weakly. We don't leave people behind, Major Hayes said simply. The battle lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, 37 Vorok drones were destroyed or disabled. The human fleet had lost 3 ships and suffered damage. To 7 others, by Council standards, it was a devastating victory. How? Admiral Zexstar asked as he stared at the tactical display. They tried to adapt to our tactics, Lieutenant Commander Barnes explained, but we don't really have tactics. We just shoot everything that moves and see what happens. That's not a strategy, Admiral Zexstar protested. Worked, Admiral Sullivan pointed out. The victory at Kepler defense line was just the beginning. Over the following weeks, the human fleet pushed deeper into Vorok territory, winning battle after battle through methods that horrified their alien allies. The humans used their own damaged ships as guided missiles. They sent boarding parties to capture enemy vessels in hand-to-hand combat. They deployed weapons that seemed designed to cause maximum psychological damage. Alongside physical destruction, Major Hayes led a ground assault on the mining station at Rigel 7, fighting through mechanical defenders with a combination of advanced technology and what she called good old-fashioned violence. Her Marines treated the deadly combat like a competitive sport, celebrating successful missions with disturbing enthusiasm. They're not normal, Admiral Zexstar reported to the Council after the 3rd major victory. They fight like the universe is trying to kill them. It probably is, Admiral Dexani replied from Nexus Prime. That's what Deathworlders do. They survive. The Vorok collective intelligence was struggling to process human behavior. Their adaptive algorithms were designed to counter logical Military strategies, not the organized chaos that the humans called tactics. The machines could not understand a species that charged directly at superior firepower while shouting what sounded like battle cries. "They're using music during combat," Admiral Zexstar reported in his next briefing. "Loud, aggressive music that they claim helps them fight better." "Music?" Admiral Dexani asked. "They call it rock and roll," Zexstar said. "I think it's designed to make them more violent." The humans introduced concepts that the Vorthok had never encountered: acceptable losses, tactical sacrifice, creative problem solving. The machines attempted to process patterns like, if it moves, shoot it, and when in doubt, use more explosives. Lieutenant Commander Barnes became famous throughout the fleet for his tactical innovations. His favorite strategy was to create what he called controlled chaos. Human ships would attack from multiple directions simultaneously, using unpredictable flight patterns and weapons combinations that changed from battle to battle. The key, Barnes explained to a group of alien observers, is to make sure the enemy never knows what you're going to do next. Hell, half the time we don't know what we're going to do next. The psychological impact on the Vorthok was as devastating as the physical damage. The machine collective had never encountered a species that seemed to enjoy fighting. Their programming could not account for beings who used humor to cope with mortal danger, soldiers who volunteered for suicide missions with genuine enthusiasm. "They're not just winning," Admiral Zexstar reported after watching the humans destroy an entire Vorthok battle group. "They're having fun doing it." The tide of war was turning, but the aliens were beginning to wonder if they had traded one nightmare for another. The humans were effective allies, but they were also absolutely terrifying. They fought with a casual brutality that made the Vorthok look civilized by comparison. "We asked for help," Admiral Lexani said quietly as she reviewed the latest battle reports. "Think we got more than we bargained for." Humans, meanwhile, were just getting started. Chief Engineer Pete Jackson stood in the engine room of the Defiance, staring at a machine that no sane person would have built. It was a mess of cables, processors, and what looked like random electronic components all connected together in ways that hurt to look at. "You sure this thing will work?" asked Lieutenant Rodriguez, eyeing the contraption nervously, honestly. "No idea," Pete replied cheerfully. "That's the whole point." Pete had been working on his latest project for 3 weeks. The Vorthok drones were getting smarter, adapting faster to human tactics. So Pete decided to build something that even he couldn't predict. "See, the problem with fighting smart machines," he explained to the growing crowd of engineers, "is that they're smarter than us. They can think faster, calculate better, and learn from every mistake." "So how do we beat them?" Rodriguez asked. "We don't try to be smarter," Pete said with a grin. "We try to be crazier." The device Pete had built was called a Chaos Engine. It was designed to control the ship's weapon systems. But instead of using logical targeting algorithms, it used completely random patterns based on human unpredictability. "I fed it every piece of human entertainment I could find," Pete explained. "Movies, music, books, video games, sports footage. Then I added data from our most chaotic battles and told it to make weapon targeting decisions the same way humans. Make creative decisions." "That sounds insane," Rodriguez said. "Exactly," Pete replied. "The Vorthok can adapt to patterns. They can't adapt to pure madness." The first test came during the battle for the Altair system. Captain Helen Moore commanded the human squadron that faced off against a Vorthok fleet of 50 drones. The enemy had studied human tactics for months and believed they could predict human behavior. They were wrong. Captain Moore's ships moved like a school of fish, flowing around each other in patterns that seemed random but somehow worked perfectly. Her squadron communicated through subtle cues that the aliens couldn't detect, coordinating attacks with an instinctive precision that defied explanation. "Target the lead drone," Moore ordered. "Which one?" her weapons officer asked. "The one that feels right," Moore replied. The human ships opened fire in a pattern that made no sense. Some targeted the strongest enemies. Others went after the weakest. A few seemed to be shooting at empty space. The Vorthok drones tried to analyze the attack pattern and found nothing to analyze. Pete's Chaos Engine was working perfectly. The weapon systems fired based on human intuition rather than machine. Logic. The targeting was unpredictable, chaotic, and devastatingly effective. "The drones are confused," reported the tactical officer. "They're firing at where they think we should be, not where we actually are." "Good," Captain Moore said. "Keep them guessing." The battle became a masterpiece of organized confusion. Human ships attacked from 17 different directions simultaneously, using tactics that seemed impossible. They coordinated without communicating, anticipated without planning, and somehow managed to destroy 31 enemy drones while losing only 2 ships? "How did you do that?" Admiral Zexstar asked when the battle was over. "Practice," Captain Moore replied simply. "Practice at what?" "Being human." Meanwhile, Dr. Lisa Carter was making discoveries that would change the war. Her xenobiology team had been studying captured Vorok technology for weeks, trying to understand how the machine intelligence worked. The collective consciousness is their greatest strength and their greatest weakness, she explained to Admiral Sullivan during a strategy meeting. They share information instantly across their entire network, which makes them incredibly efficient. "But," Sullivan prompted, "that also means that anything that affects one drone affects them all," Carter continued. "If we could introduce the right kind of interference into their network, we could crash the entire system." "What kind of interference?" "It's a kind they're not designed to process," Carter said with a smile that would have frightened most aliens. "Pure human irrationality." Carter's team began developing what they called madness protocols. These were tactical algorithms designed to create maximum chaos and confusion in enemy systems. The protocols were based on human thought patterns, human creativity, and human stubbornness. "We're essentially teaching their computers to think like humans," Carter explained. "And humans think in ways that break machines." The first test of the madness protocols came during the assault on Vorok's Station Omega. The station was defended by 200 drones and was considered impregnable by Council standards. The humans attacked it with 12 ships. "This is suicide," Admiral Zexstar protested when he learned of the plan. "This is Thursday," Major Hayes replied. "The attack began with what the humans called a poke-and-run strategy. Single ships would approach the station, fire a few shots, and retreat before the drones could respond. The Vorok tried to analyze the pattern, but couldn't find one because there wasn't one to find. Then the real attack began. All 12 human ships approached from different directions, firing weapons that created sensory overload in the Vorok network. The Chaos Engine's targeting systems created patterns that hurt to think about. The madness protocols transmitted data that made the drone collective consciousness feel dizzy. "The station's defenses are failing," reported Lieutenant Barnes. "Their targeting systems can't lock onto us." "Why not?" Admiral Sullivan asked. "Because we're not following the laws of physics according to their calculations," Barnes replied. "We're moving in ways that their computers say should be impossible." The battle for Station Omega lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the humans had captured the facility intact, along with 47 disabled Vorok drones and a massive database of enemy intelligence. "How many casualties?" Admiral Zexstar asked, dreading the answer. 3 injured, Major Hayes reported. 1 broken arm, 1 concussion, and 1 guy who got hit by a piece of flying debris. "That's all? We're hard to kill," Hayes said with a shrug. The victory at Station Omega marked a turning point in the war. The Vorok collective intelligence was beginning to suffer from what Dr. Carter called digital indigestion. The machine consciousness was trying to process human behavior and finding itself unable to cope with concepts like spite, stubbornness, and creative violence. "They're starting to make mistakes," Carter reported after analyzing captured data. "The network is developing what can only be described as mechanical neuroses." "Meaning?" Admiral Sullivan asked. "Meaning they're going crazy." Carter replied cheerfully. The Vorok attempted to negotiate for the first time in their history. They sent a communication to the human fleet offering to spare Earth and its colonies in exchange for human withdrawal. From the war, Admiral Sullivan's response became legendary throughout the galaxy. "Tell them," she said calmly, "that we don't negotiate with bullies. We teach them better manners." The human fleet continued its advance into Vorok territory. Every battle brought new horrors for the machine intelligence. Humans who fought, while injured, soldiers who volunteered for impossible missions, species that seemed to consider mortal danger an acceptable workplace hazard. The machines tried everything to understand their enemy. They analyzed human behavior patterns, studied human psychology, even attempted to communicate directly with captured humans. What do you want? A Vorok interrogation unit asked Marine Sergeant Danny Foster after his capture. To go home, Foster replied, then surrender. End this war. Can't do that, Foster said. Got people counting on me. Our chances of survival are less than 3%. I've had worse odds, Foster said with a grin. Besides, 3% is still better than 0. The Vorok unit spent 6 hours trying to understand this logic and finally shut down from computational overflow. Dr. Carter made her most important discovery while studying the failed interrogation. The Vorok collective consciousness had a critical vulnerability that no one had noticed before. It could not process truly irrational input without risking system-wide crashes. They're too smart for their own good, she explained. Their intelligence is based on logic and pattern recognition. When they encounter something that doesn't follow logical patterns, their systems overload, trying to make sense of it. How do we use that? Admiral Sullivan asked. Give them something so irrational, so completely human, that it breaks their brains, Carter replied. We introduce them to the concept of fighting a war because it's the right thing to do. The plan that emerged from Carter's research was as beautiful as it was terrifying. The humans would attack the Vorok capital system not with overwhelming force, but with overwhelming humanity. They would show the machines what it meant to be gloriously, stubbornly, impossibly human, and they would do it with a smile. The Vorok capital system looked like a machine god's nightmare. Thousands of metallic ships hung in perfect formation around a massive artificial planet that pulsed with cold blue light. The entire Vorok fleet was here, every drone and battle station they had left. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Defiance, watching the enemy formation with calm eyes. Behind her, the human fleet waited. 37 ships against 3,000. By any reasonable calculation, it was suicide. Admiral called Lieutenant Commander Barnes. The alien observers are requesting permission to retreat to a safe distance. Tell them they can leave if they want, Sullivan replied. But they might miss something interesting. Admiral Zexstar remained on the bridge, though his 4 hands were shaking. Admiral Sullivan, this is madness. You cannot possibly win against those numbers. You're probably right, Sullivan agreed. But we're going to try anyway. Why? Zexstar asked desperately. Why throw away your lives for a war that isn't even yours? Admiral Sullivan turned to look at him with eyes that had seen too much death and too little peace. Because someone has to stand up to bullies, because there are people counting on us, because it's the right thing to do. That's not logical, Zexstar protested. Logic is overrated, Major Hayes said from her position near the Marine deployment bay. Sometimes you just have to do what feels right. The human fleet began its final advance. They moved in a formation that looked random, but somehow felt perfect. Each ship followed its own path, yet they moved together like parts of a single organism. All ships, Admiral Sullivan announced over the fleet communication channel. This is it. Today, we show these machines what it means to be human. Today, we teach them that some things are worth fighting for, no matter the odds. The Vorok fleet responded exactly as expected. 3,000 ships moved in perfect coordination, their weapons charging, their targeting systems locking onto the approaching humans. The machine collective consciousness calculated an T7% probability of total human destruction. Then, Dr. Carter activated her final weapon. Transmitting Omega Protocol, she announced from her station. All ships, prepare for full spectrum chaos deployment. The Omega Protocol was Dr. Carter's masterpiece. It was a direct transmission to the Vorok collective consciousness, but instead of containing tactical data or weapon specifications, it contained something far more dangerous. It contained pure human experience. Every human emotion Carter could catalog, every piece of human art, music, and literature, Every memory of love, loss, hope, and stubborn determination. Every story of humans who faced impossible odds and refused to give up. The transmission hit the Vorok network like a virus, made of feelings. The machine collective consciousness tried to process the data and found itself overwhelmed. It encountered concepts that made no sense to a logical mind. Love without purpose. Sacrifice without gain. Fighting for principles instead of survival. The Vorok fleet is faltering, reported Lieutenant Barnes. Their formation is breaking. Up on the main screen, they could see the enemy ships beginning to drift. The perfect coordination was gone, replaced by confusion and system errors. Some drones were firing at empty space. Others had stopped moving entirely. What's happening? To them, Admiral Zexstar asked in wonder. They're trying to understand why we fight, Dr. Carter explained, and it's breaking their minds. The human fleet pressed their attack. They flew through the confused Vorok formation like wolves through a flock of sheep. The enemy ships barely responded, their targeting systems overloaded with contradictory data. Focus fire on the command ship, Admiral Sullivan ordered. Which one is that? Asked the weapons officer. The biggest, angriest-looking one, Sullivan replied. The human ships opened fire on the massive command vessel at the center of the enemy formation. Their weapons created a light show that could be seen from 3 star systems away. The Vorok ship tried to return fire, but its systems were too damaged by the psychological warfare to aim properly. Major Hayes led the final assault. Her marine shuttles launched from the human ships and flew directly into the heart of the enemy formation. They landed on the Vorok command ship and began fighting their way through the corridors. Resistance is minimal, Hayes reported over the communication channel. The drones seemed confused. Half of them are just standing still. The Marines fought through automated defenses and mechanical guards, but the real battle was happening in the digital realm. The Vorok collective consciousness was suffering from a complete breakdown as it tried to process human irrationality. Network is cascading, Dr. Carter announced. The entire collective is shutting down. On the command ship, Major Hayes and her Marines reached the central processing core. It was a massive chamber filled with quantum computers and data storage devices. At the center was a single terminal that pulsed with dying light. This is the heart of their network, Hayes said into her communicator. What do I do with it? Talk to it, Dr. Carter replied. Talk to it. Tell it why we fight. Major Hayes approached the terminal. She had no idea if the machine could understand her, but she spoke anyway. You want to know why we came here? She said to the flickering screen. Why we risked everything to stop you. It's because you hurt people who couldn't defend themselves. Because you destroyed worlds and killed innocents. Because someone had to stand up and say no. The terminal's light grew brighter. You don't fight. Because we're the strongest, Hayes continued. We fight because it's right. We don't win because we're the smartest. We win because we don't give up. The Vorok collective consciousness tried one last time to understand. It analyzed the concept of fighting for others, of sacrificing for strangers, of standing up to impossible odds because it was the right thing to do. The logic circuits overloaded. The network crashed across the capital system. Ships went dark. Their engines stopped. Their weapons powered down. Their adaptive intelligence fell silent. The war was over. All enemy ships have surrendered, Lieutenant Barnes reported, though his voice was filled with disbelief. Surrendered? Admiral Sullivan asked. They're transmitting a message, Barnes replied. They want to negotiate terms. The surrender ceremony took place on the Vorok command ship. Admiral Sullivan, Major Hayes, and Dr. Carter met with the surviving Vorok leadership. The machines had been reduced to basic programming, their collective consciousness permanently damaged by human irrationality. We do not understand, the lead Vorok unit said in a mechanical voice. Your tactics were inefficient. Your losses were acceptable to you. Your reasons for fighting made no logical sense. That's what makes us human, Dr. Carter replied. You fought for others who could not fight for themselves, the machine continued. You risked everything for principles rather than survival. This behavior is irrational. Yeah, Major Hayes said with a grin. Isn't it great? The peace treaty? was signed 3 days later. Vorok agreed to withdraw from all conquered territories and to limit their expansion. In return, the humans agreed not to transmit any more psychological warfare into their networks. "We have learned," the Vorok representative said during the ceremony, "that there are things worse than death in the universe," such as, Admiral Sullivan asked, trying to understand humans. The human fleet returned to Council space as heroes. Admiral Zexstar filed his final report with shaking hands. "The humans have achieved the impossible," he wrote. "They have defeated an enemy that could not be defeated through military might alone. They did it by being so completely, impossibly human that the enemy could not comprehend them. The galaxy is safe," he continued, "but I am not sure it is safer. We now have a species among us that considers impossible odds a personal challenge and mortal danger an acceptable workplace hazard." Admiral Sullivan was promoted to Fleet Admiral and given command of the new Terran Federation Defense Force. The humans established bases throughout the galaxy, offering protection to smaller species while making it clear that aggression would not be tolerated. Captain Morrison, promoted to Admiral, led the first human deep space exploration mission beyond the galactic rim. As his ship crossed into unknown territory, he reflected on humanity's place in the cosmos. "We came from a world that tried to kill us every day," he said to his crew. "We turned that into our greatest strength. Whatever's out there in the dark, we'll face it the same way we faced everything else." "How's that, sir?" asked his first officer. "Together," Morrison replied, with a really bad attitude. The galaxy had entered a new era of peace, enforced by beings who had evolved on a world that would kill most galactic citizens in minutes. The humans, meanwhile, continued to explore, driven by the same curiosity and stubbornness that had made them such effective warriors. Dr. Carter, our director of xenological studies, had the final word on humanity's impact on galactic civilization. "We've learned that the universe is a dangerous place," she said in her first official report. "Good thing we're dangerous too. The stars belonged to humanity now, and they were ready for whatever came next."